Hello, everybody. Come on in. Please have a seat or stand in the back. That's a perfectly good spot. We are passing around copies of the annual report. We probably don't have enough for everyone to hold on to one, but we've got several. Is there an area in the room where they have not made their way? Any areas in the room where they have not made their way? We might actually have enough for everybody to have one. Thank you. I call to order this annual meeting for St. Paul's Episcopal Church in Fayetteville, Arkansas. There is a quorum present because in the Episcopal Church, whoever's here is a quorum. That's awfully convenient. Let's start with a prayer. The Lord be with you. Let us pray. O God of unchangeable power and eternal light, look favorably on your whole church, that wonderful and sacred mystery. By the effectual working of your providence, carry out in tranquility the plan of salvation. Let the whole world see and know that things which were cast down are being raised up, and things which had grown old are being made new, and that all things are being brought to their perfection by Him through whom all things were made, your Son, Jesus Christ our Lord, who lives and reigns with you in the unity of the Holy Spirit, one God, now and forever. Amen. There are really just two orders of business for us, but I hope that there will be more conversation than just those few orders of business, those few items. And the first item is to elect members for the next 3-year term on the vestry. Through several weeks of balloting, the people of this parish have nominated Susan Mays Carney, Mac Mayfield, Susan Hayes, and Trent Palmer to serve. Are there any other nominations for vestry? Seeing none, is there a motion that nominations cease? And a second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no? Thank you. Maybe there be a motion that we elect by acclamation those 4 members of the vestry. Who would make that motion? Thank you. And a second. All those in favor of that motion say aye. Aye. Opposed, no? Thank you. Let's say congratulations to those who have been elected. I want to express my gratitude to John Payne as well, who's willing to serve this coming year as clerk of the vestry. He was elected by the vestry to serve as clerk. Also, if you have not heard, Aubrey Pate and Dave McMath have been elected by the vestry to serve as wardens for the vestry this coming year as co-wardens. No distinction between senior or junior. They'll serve as co-wardens for this year. Let's say thank you to them for their willingness to serve in that way. And lastly, I want to say thank you to Will Clark, who's not here because he's recovering from surgery after a skiing accident. Thank you to Will Clark, to Shay Widener, as well as to David Jolliffe and Sally Langford. All 4 of them have served on the vestry. David for 2 years as senior warden, is that right? And Sally also as our junior warden. Let's say thank you to them for their years of service. The vestry asked me a couple of months ago, what happens if there are more nominations? And I said, I don't know. What do you think? We'd have a ballot if that's the case. The canons require that we elect the vestry at the annual meeting. I love how St. Paul's has come to that place where we take our time and don't require everybody to be here, because not everybody who's a part of our church can be here in person this Sunday at 10 o'clock. And so the will of the parish is expressed in other ways, and this group kind of adopts that will and affirms typically the election of those members. And I'm grateful that we have gotten to that point. What a joy. I've been a part of many annual meetings where we have ballot after ballot after ballot after ballot after ballot. And I say to the whole staff, be ready, because I'll call on you to make a report if the balloting takes too long. So we're really grateful that that balloting process is concluded now. The only other items on our agenda, though I'll make time for any comments or questions that you have, the canons ask that the rector and the treasurer provide a report. We've provided those to you in person, but I wanted to say a couple of words from my perspective about where we are and where we're headed. And then I haven't laid eyes on Penny yet. I'm not sure, is Penny here? I wanted to give her time if she wanted to share some thoughts with us. If she's not here, I'm happy to talk to you a little bit about our financial picture, and then, of course, to hear from you. A couple of words from me about St. Paul's. What a privilege it is to be here. What a joy it is to be here. I sense that you share that. The only time when annual meetings are full like this is when people are really angry or really happy. I choose to believe it's the latter of those, and I sense that. There is a great spirit of love and joy that has been indicative of this parish for generations and is true in this moment as well. I'm grateful to be a part of that. Many of you have heard me say how I got here a couple of times, so forgive me if you've heard it. But I've known Lowell for, a decade or so through General Convention and the Chicago Consultation. And despite being a big church, at times it feels like a really small church. And I've never met someone who loved his or her job more than Lowell Grisham. Never. Every time I'd see him, he'd just sort of shine with this great joy about his church. And he talked to us, whoever was in the audience, about what God was doing at St. Paul's. And I thought to myself, I want to see it. Maybe Lowell will invite me to come and visit, or maybe 1 week while I'm on a cross-country vacation with my family, we'll swing by Fayetteville, Arkansas. Well, I never got that chance. But a mutual friend of ours sent me an email and said, have you heard that Lowell is retiring? I said, no. And she asked if I'd be interested in knowing more about that church. I said, of course. Who would not want to know more about that church? And the next thing you know, Elizabeth and I are here, and our family is here, and we're glad to be here. It's really a joy to be a part of a place where God is doing amazing things. I'm grateful for this church. I'm grateful. I'm grateful to the staff. I'm grateful for the lay volunteers. I'm grateful for the search committee that not only recommended me to the vestry for a call, but let us, Elizabeth and me and our family, get to know St. Paul's and Fayetteville even before we got here, so that we could be confident that indeed this is where God is calling us, and that God is calling us to this ministry together. So I'm really grateful for all of those, and most particularly to the Holy Spirit, which has brought us to this moment. Mary Jo? Thank you. Let's say thank you to our search committee who worked very hard. Thank you. I read through the minutes of the last annual meeting when Susie and others sort of gave a report about the search committee and sort of where we were at that time. Isn't it amazing where a year has brought us? And a lot of people worked really hard, harder than I could see. I was only a tiny piece of it. They worked really hard. But I'm grateful to Channing and to Linda and to all those who made that a joyful process for me, and I hope it was joyful for them as well. I don't have any particular items to mention about the rector's report. I'll say a little bit more about budget and finances first. Any questions for me about the nature of our ministry together before we look at our financial picture and at the budget? Any questions about my work here or my time here as your rector? Any questions? My old boss in Montgomery, he's not that old, but he was my boss a while ago in Montgomery. Every year, today's their annual meeting as well, and every year before the annual meeting, he would say, Evan, I really wish I wrote what I was going to say down, but I just kind of wing it. And he's the kind of person that writes everything down, and so it was always kind of risky to see him do that. And today I sent him a text and said, Robert, I wish you taught me how to write everything down, because I don't really know what's gonna happen. But part of the joy that he feels, the joy that he modeled, and also the freedom and joy that I feel, is it's such a pleasure to be here and to serve in this place and to share our hopes and our dreams for what God will do among us, that I kind of get to show up and say, all right, what are we going to do next? What's on your mind? What's on your heart? Any questions or comments that you would make for me? Yes. Let's hold on a second. Hold on a second. I'm going to let you use this microphone, not because everybody can't hear you. They might be able to hear you, but there are people who are watching online and they'll want to hear what you have to say. So if you'll stand and tell us your name and then hold that microphone. Thank you.
Susan Murray.
Thank you.
And my comment is, and I think I probably speak for everybody in the room, is thank you. Thank you very much for taking this position and being the good and kind influence you are to us all.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. I have colleagues who serve in places where it's hard to enjoy their jobs. This isn't one of those places. I show up every day excited about what's going to come because of the love and care that y'all offer me and my family. Thank you. Yes, Karen.
I'm Karen Hannatown, and the second paragraph of your report, I'm just unclear about these numbers. Worship is the heart of our life together, yes. In 2018, we averaged 447 people in church each Sunday, and our weekday services included 8,156 worshipers.
Yes.
How many weekday services are counted in that?
Thank you. All of them, which is to say morning and evening prayer, Monday through Friday, a 10 a.m. Eucharist that happens in the church, a 6:15 Eucharist that happens here on Wednesdays, any other unusual weekday services like Ash Wednesday. If it falls any day other than a Saturday night or a Sunday, then it falls into that. And that's the aggregate of all of those services. Also, if a member of the clergy goes to someone's house on a Tuesday or to a hospital and offers communion, that also gets recorded. So it's all of the worship that has happened here that's not Saturday night or during Sunday. Every week. Every week we have morning prayer, Monday through Friday, evening prayer, Monday through Friday. Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you. Great. All told in the year. All told in the year. Yes. Sorry. All told in the year. Thank you. Thank you, Malcolm.
Adam Cox. I just wanted to know about the youth program for this coming year, your thoughts on it.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. We are celebrating Alan and Amanda's ministry with us as the school year ends. And their ministry as our youth director and associate youth director will finish at the end of the school year. We've got a lot to be thankful for and a lot to celebrate. Very soon, maybe even as early as tomorrow, I'll begin kind of the work of finding a search committee to help us recruit and interview and select whoever that next director of youth ministries will be. It'll be a full-time person in the same venue, the same kind of structure as Amanda's position has been. No change to the spirit of that program. We want to build on that success. So that's kind of the direction it's headed. I anticipate that a full-time youth director will be in place as soon as the school year is over. Sometimes those things are surprising. Sometimes that happens earlier or maybe later. But I think we're in a good place to hire someone in a good spot to do that work so that there's no loss of continuity in terms of who's leading that program. Kirby? Hold on a second.
I'm curious to know what were the major causes of the over $500,000 shortage in income in 2018, because I see the 2019 budget is right back up to approximately the $1.6 million, which was what the budget was for 2018. So what caused that over $500,000 shortage?
Thanks. That's a great question. May I ask us to wait just a minute until we turn the page to the treasurer's report, and then we'll talk in detail about the finances. But if at any reason it looks like I'm going to forget that, then stand up and wave and holler, because I want to make sure we come back to that. Thank you, Kirby. Any other questions about the nature of my ministry here or the nature of ministry here at St. Paul's before we get into the financial details? All right, if you are in the room and you are a member of the vestry who will serve in the coming year, would you stand, please? Let us see you. And if you're in the back of the room, wave so we'll see you. All right. So here are members of our vestry, several of them, and the rest of their names are on the back cover. The faces of the new individuals and the names are on the back cover. These are the people that you all have elected to carry out the work of this parish, to care for the physical plant, the financial resources, and to support me and the rest of the staff in the work that we're doing. So if you ever have any questions or concerns, please share them with me or with any member of the vestry. We're partners in this work. If you share a concern with them, they're going to come to me and say, hey, Jane's upset about this. Let's talk about it. That's the way we work, and we share that ministry fully. So please make sure that you know who's serving on the vestry, and make sure you're willing to offer concerns. Thank y'all. Y'all may sit down. To that end, I'll also mention that next weekend, the vestry and I will be on retreat. We will leave Friday late afternoon. We're going to head to Camp Mitchell, and we're going to spend 2 nights at Camp Mitchell, and we'll spend most of that time kind of assessing where it is that we are as a parish and making some strategic plans for where God is calling us to be in the coming years. It sounds like, what could you possibly do for 2 nights? We fill it full, and because it's a big church with a lot of moving pieces. And so if you have any hopes, any dreams, any worries that you would like to share with me or a member of the vestry, if you share those with us before we leave Friday afternoon, we can bring those with us to that retreat. If you don't have a chance to do that, don't hesitate though. Please share that with us. We meet every month and we'll continue to do so. The choir members are whisking off to go and to get ready for the service. Any other questions about ministry in general before we look at our financial picture? All right, great. We'll take a look, and let's start, Kirby, with your question. Let's look at 2018 year, and Penny did not sneak in. Am I right in saying that? I didn't see Penny sneak in. Great. Penny Amusiel is our treasurer. She's been our treasurer for a while. In the Episcopal Church, treasurers have an interesting role. They serve not just the parish, but they serve the Episcopal Church, capital T, capital E, capital C, the Episcopal Church, and in particular, the Diocese of Arkansas in our case. Their job is to safeguard our resources and to make sure that our financial reports are clear and accurate, and to make sure that the vestry and the rector and the staff are doing what they can to be good stewards of those resources. Penny, as you know, is ably assisted in that work by Joy Poole, who is our new financial administrator, our new parish administrator. If you haven't met Joy, I hope you'll meet her. She's here Monday to Friday. She's not a member of this church. She has come to worship with us a couple of times, but primarily she and her family worship in another congregation. But she's here Monday to Friday during the week. Hope you'll stop by and see her. Many of you have spoken to her on the phone already about your 2018 gifts or your 2019 gifts or any other questions that you have. She is a wonderful, wonderful asset for our church. She brings a lot of financial acumen and parish sort of leadership that she has from previous churches where she has worked, as well as in the secular world. Unlike Susie Freeman, though, she hasn't been here for 30 plus years. She doesn't know us. She doesn't know our children and our parents. She doesn't know the way we like to do things, but she's learning fast. And I joked with her and with the finance committee the other day that 30 years from now, she'll know all those things. Which is really just a way to say, to remind us that we have to be patient and encouraging with her, because many of us know that all we have to do is call Susie or send her an email, and Susie knows what that means and how to make it happen. But Joy, of course, doesn't know that, and I don't know it either. So join me in welcoming Joy and being patient with her. She's the one that's prepared our financial reports and that Penny's submitted to us. In 2018, we ended the year in the aggregate, and this is not just our operations, but it's our operations as well as our designated funds. Operating funds are what we use to pay the bills, what we use to do the ministries that the vestry kind of says, this is what we're going to do with the pledges, the resources that are given to us. It pays all of our salaries. It pays for youth ministry, children's ministry, adult ministry. It pays for most of our missions and outreach work. That's all operations. The other part is designated funds. So when you give money for flowers on the altar, they go for flowers on the altar. It has no effect on the budget at all. We don't budget for flowers on the altar. We rely on your generosity. And the St. Elizabeth's Flower Guild does a wonderful job with that, a wonderful job not only decorating flowers, but using your resources for that. So there are 2 different types of monies at St. Paul's, the operating funds, and this is true in most churches, the operating funds and the designated funds. Let me give you one more example. When you give money to St. Paul's as a part of your pledge or your gift, or you just put money in the plate, that money goes everywhere the vestry has identified the budget should go. So some of it goes to community meals, and some of it goes to children's ministry, and some of it goes to pay the light bill. That's the way it works. If you write a separate check and you say community meals, then that money's been designated for a particular purpose. And so we will make sure that it either goes to community meals, or if for some reason you name a purpose that we can't honor, we'll contact you and say, I'm sorry, but that ministry doesn't exist here, or we can't use it in that way. Would you be willing for us to use it in another way? So designated funds and operating funds. Our 2018 financial reports lump all of those together because we haven't done a very good job of designating or separating those. That sometimes expenses or income get posted into a line in the account that is actually a designated, it's identified by our accounting software as a designated account, but actually those are operating income or operating funds. And so as a result, when we ask for our financial report, it's all mixed in there together. In 2019, next year, a year from now, it'll look really different because we're being pretty intentional about how we identify what's designated and what's operating. All of those monies lumped together, there was a loss of $541,000. And you'll see under that there are two major pieces of that. $100,000 of it is the write-off of a receivable. I'll say more about that in a second. And $412,000 and $412,051 is a loss in the endowment value, just a loss in the book value. I bet most of us lost money in the market in the final quarter of the year. Most of it's bounced back. I haven't looked at the market in a couple of days. But so of the 541, 512 plus is those two items. The rest of it is a mix, and I'm happy to show any of you the details of those books at any time, and you can join me in trying to look at which lines are designated and which lines are operating. The vestry looked at those numbers, and we estimated that we ended up in ended up with an operating loss of about $22,000 or $23,000. The vestry adopted a budget that had a where's Dave McMath? Is that about right? $27,000 deficit to begin with. So actually, it looks, as best we can tell, that we did better than we expected to for the year. But the 2018 numbers, everything gets lumped together, so it's hard to figure that out. I'll tell you that in the budget is about what that was for the previous year, but we've been pretty careful about how we identify that. And the first draft of Penny's report that Joy and I, the numbers that we sent, didn't flesh out all of those different income lines. And Penny raised that question. She said, the pledge numbers are about the same, and yet the budget seems bigger. Can you help us understand that? And so we fleshed that out a little bit. One of the important principles for me that I've set for our vestry is that if we're going to call it pledge income, it needs to be on a pledge card. That we're not going to say, well, I'm pretty sure she's good for it. She's given every year for the last 15 years and she's never filled out a pledge card, so let's just assume that that's going to come in. I don't want us to do that. I want us to be very clear and transparent about what we expect and what we don't expect. So the pledge item in our budget, and if you look at the pledge report at the bottom of the first page of the treasurer's report, the pledge report shows that the total pledge amount is $1.16 million. That's actual pledge cards or text. Sometimes we get text messages, sometimes we get emails, sometimes we get phone calls, in which case we write it on a pledge card or we print it out or we document it in another way. So all of that are actual pledges. You'll also see that there are 77 households that I have labeled as stopped pledges. I bet many of them will continue to give, but we don't have a card for them and we need to adopt a budget. And I'm not willing for our vestry to pretend that people have pledged if they haven't actually pledged. We've got to live on what we've been promised. We've got to live within our means. And so that kind of limits some of what we can do. I hope if you haven't turned in a pledge card that you will and that you'll continue to give, because the vestry will use every penny that you give to this church for the ministry of this church. But we also want to be really clear and responsible with our financial resources. So the pledge line is the $1.15, $1.16 million, but there are lots of other sources of our income. Some is the cash that you put into the plate, which we call plate. If you put a $20 bill on the plate, we're grateful for that, but we have no idea who gave it to us. So we can't really we can estimate based on previous gifts what it might be at the end of the year, but we don't have any indication of what that could be because it's not traceable in that way. So plate is distinct. A new line in our budget this year is called non-pledge, which are checks that people give us, people who have not filled out a pledge card. Some people are really faithful in their giving, but they haven't given a pledge card, and we can track that over several years. And in 2018, about $138,000 was given by check or by other designated thing, by other sort of traceable instrument, from people who did not fill out pledge cards. And we've also looked that in the first 3 weeks of this year, our non-pledge income is $10,000 or more, which means we feel like we're on track for about $120 at least, so that's part of that budget. The rest of the items are fairly small, the endowment enhancement being an exception to that. The vestry, with the advice of Jim Wood, who is our endowment manager at Stevens Incorporated, we take 5% of the gross at the end of the third quarter as part of our budget. He's let us know that our holdings, for the most part, will sustain that over the year, so that's a big item for the budget. The rest are sort of little things, but we feel really good. The vestry feels really good. They also feel like it's conservative isn't the right word, because we're always stretching and we're always counting on faithfulness, but we haven't overextended ourselves. We haven't adopted a budget that reflects hopes or dreams, except for the hope that we all have in Christ and in what God is doing here. So that's the long answer to your question, which is, yeah, we lost some money in 2018. It's hard for us to present exactly how much we lost in terms of operating. It's not nearly as much as you might see in the $541,000. We're going to watch that really closely. We're going to be really careful about the budget we adopt and make sure that it reflects not only what people have said they're going to give, but also what we anticipate that they will give. Let me circle back around, because I told you I was going to talk about the $100,000 write-off, and then I forgot about it. Back in 2009, a very generous individual promised us a gift. I don't know exactly what instrument that individual used. I bet it's something like a charitable remainder trust, which means this individual continues to benefit from the income of those investments. And when this person dies, the value of the portfolio becomes a part of St. Paul's. It is perfectly acceptable in accounting practices for us to count that even before we've received it as a receivable. So many businesses would do the same thing. So when that was promised to us in 2009, we put it on our books as $100,000 of income, knowing that one of these days that individual would die and we would get it. And every year the auditor looks at the value of those investments, and as long as they're more than $100,000, the auditor is fine with that. If they were to ever drop below that, maybe we'd have some questions. Part of the challenge is that St. Paul's, like most churches, we do not have accrual-based accounting, we have cash-based accounting, which means that every January 1st, everything kind of starts over again. And so because of that, the receivable became a little misleading. It's like money that we haven't actually received. It also meant that whenever this person dies and gives us the gift, we don't get to count it. It's already been counted for. And so we chose, as a finance committee, and the vestry acted last week, to write that off of our books so that whenever that person does die, that we will have it as income. And this seemed like a good year because we're sort of cleaning up our books, and also it was a fairly healthy financial year for us to go ahead and take that receivable off the books. So that's where the $100,000 was. Many of you are accountants. I am not. So if I've said something that is anathema, I hope you'll either gently guide us back or speak to me afterward to make sure that I don't make that mistake again. Anyway, so that's, yes, Kirby. Hold on just a second. Those people on the internet right now are saying, who is that talking and what is he saying? One of the great ministries and gifts that we have is that online ministry, and I appreciate y'all's patience as we adapt to it. Yes.
So thank you for the explanation of all that. You did a very good job, I believe, being for a non-accountant. The other question I have is, I see that we had a $412,051 write-off in the endowments. My question is, of that remaining $3.111 million remaining in endowment funds, how much of those funds are restricted endowment versus non-restricted?
That's a great question. I don't know the answer off the top of my head. I was surprised to discover how few of our endowments are restricted in that way. As far as I know, there are no trusts that have been set up. I've asked several times. No trust language, no trust documents. Just people who've given these gifts to us to use. There are a few of them that are narrowly restricted. If I named them out loud, I would probably get them wrong, but I seem to remember that the Shively Endowment is particularly named in that way. The McMichael Endowment, although certainly funds our McMichael series, is for the most part unrestricted in that way. So for almost all of it is unrestricted. One of the things I'd love for the vestry to work on in this coming year is to be more intentional about our planned giving. Because if we don't demonstrate to the parish our ability to honor your intentions in your estate planning, we're not really inviting you to make that kind of commitment. And the reality is that many of you who are very generous to the church will reach a point in your life when you can't be that generous, either because of a change in your finances or because you move or because we die. All of us will die someday. And I hope that we can do some really good work about saying these are the opportunities for you to leave money to our endowment and to designate the purposes for which you would do that. But almost all of them, the maybe even 3/4 or more of them, are unrestricted. But the vestry tries to be really careful about how we use those in that way. Yes, thank you. Rob's got a question. Thank you, sir.
Hi. So one question I have is, I was just looking at our income in 18 and comparing it with the income that we're projecting for 19's budget, and I guess I was trying to understand the $468,000 difference. Is that related to the loss in endowment value? Did that come out of income?
Sort of. It didn't actually come out of income, but it comes out of our year-end total. So the $412,000 loss in endowment value, because our year-end financial statements do not separate effectively operating from designated, because of that, it all shows up in that same loss. So half of the answer to you is that although the change in the endowment value doesn't actually directly affect our income, except in what we will budget next year, that does change our financial report. The bit that I would draw your attention to for the more accurate comparison would be the total income line, the 1.149. That line is the income from that year.
Okay.
Yes.
So the reason I asked is because I'm tying it to our 1,617 number that you got in the income, and that's a pretty healthy increase.
It is a healthy
increase.
increase.
So that, I mean, I think it's like 40%. So I just want to understand how do we expect to achieve that, I guess, is my question.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Partly, as you can see from our pledges, although the whole and the aggregate are virtually flat, that there's quite a bit of increase in the amount individuals have pledged. So that's a part of that. Also because we're actually naming in the operating budget what those non-pledges have been given. And that it was hard for us to tell in the past where those went and how they were codified, how they were labeled. Also, the diocese has increased their support for St. Martin's. It's not 40%, though I'm not sure if 40% is the right, maybe it is, the right amount. But yes, there's that support. Also, and I'm happy to show anybody, I printed out about 20 copies of the detailed budget, happy to show that to you as well. We're also accounting for breakfast and dinner income in a way that we weren't before. That was sort of designated, and because of that, that's also in the top line, and it's also in the expenses. But your concern has my attention as well, which is this represents growth in our expectations, and that's got our attention. Every pledge, every indication to us suggests to us that yes, that's that, and we're basing our budget on what people have put on their pledge cards and what people's behavior has been in the past. We're not sitting there saying, we really want to do it, so let's just write it down on a budget. And so because of that, there is certainly a level of faith in that, but it's got my attention and the vestry's attention as it has yours. Yeah. Questions over here? Oh, Rick, hold on. Yep.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Rick.
So
I didn't see you back there.
it's good. I like detail, so I'll ask this question that's not really shown. In the past, the church has had a marginal maintenance fund for this campus.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wanting to know, has that been increased and earmarked where it's there when we need it?
Thank you very much. There is no plan in this budget to put money aside for our maintenance reserve. We talked about that in Finance Committee, and we talked about that on the vestry. The vestry chose to adopt this budget without that, despite that debate and that conversation. I wouldn't speak for the whole vestry, but part of the discussion reflected the fact that we're in a healthy cash position, healthy enough to where we feel like whatever would come our way, that we would be able to meet those needs. Also, with a large endowment, that's also something to think about. We certainly acknowledge that if there were capital that we did not use this year in ministry, if we ended the year with effectively a surplus, that would be a really helpful way to use that, to designate it for a maintenance reserve. Also, the budget that we adopted a little bit more of a cushion in the maintenance reserve part of the building maintenance expenses than in any other areas, because we kind of recognize that air conditioners go out from time to time. So in that case, our approach to the maintenance is a fairly conservative one, but the decision was made not to have a specific line in the budget to move money aside for a maintenance reserve, though that conversation continues every year when we look at the budget. J.T. Shrigley had, that's sort of his voice that he shared, and he wasn't there, but someone was willing to share it on his behalf, because that's something that we want to continue to be reminded about. Thank you. Thank you. There were several questions on this side, Samantha. Over here, let's start in the back with Molly, and then we'll come up with Mary Jo, and then we'll come further forward. Yes?
Good morning. So I'm looking at the 2018, and not an accountant, so, but I do feel like I see $29,000 unaccounted for that we spent in, so you have 100,000 and 412,000, and then it looks like there's 29,000 that we spent that's
sure.
not accounted for.
Well, it's accounted for. I'm only telling you that the receivable and the loss in endowment value are part of that loss. That money's spent elsewhere.
Yeah, I guess I'm just curious how we cover $29,000 that we didn't have coming in.
Cash on hand. Part of it's cash on hand. I mean, our cash position is healthy enough to account for that. Yeah, I mean, it's just undesignated cash reserves. Yep, thank you. Mary Jo.
I'm also not an accountant, but I was just wondering, does it come under outreach, our pledge to the diocese?
It does.
And
yes.
may I ask, do we tithe that?
The diocese asks us for 10.5%, and we give 10.5% of our operating funds.
Thank
Yes,
you.
You're welcome. Outreach.
What is covered in outreach?
What is covered in outreach?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not
Is-
questioning it, but I'm curious.
Sure.
It's not exactly a
Our contribution to the diocese, which is, as I said, 10.5% of our operating income. The money we spend to pay for ministry at St. Martin's, the University Center. Money that we spend to support our seminarians. Money that we give to Camp Mitchell. Money that we use for community meals above other donations that have been received. Habitat for Humanity, CEO, Community Clinic, Lifestyles, Seven Hills, Magdalene Serenity House, the Prison Story Project, Healing Touch, some money set aside for the Becoming Beloved Community, our Sunday Suppers ministry, and funds to put on our alternative gift market. Thank you. A question? Yeah, right up here in the front. The reason I know that is because, again, we will post on our website our budget, the detailed version of our budget. It's 5 pages of detailed spreadsheet, so it didn't work to put it in this report. But we will both put the annual report and our budget on the website so you can see it. But anybody who wants to see it in detail may come at any time. And I'm happy not only to give you the documentation, but to discuss with you any of the details in our budget. And so would Joy Poole as well. Yes, sir.
I have a question on the endowment value.
Yes.
It just seems like it's a significant drop in value. It's roughly 15%. So my question to you is it a managed, is the endowment managed by someone?
Yes, Jim Wood manages our endowment through Stevens.
And the holdings in the endowment, is it restricted where, like, if people were to give, like, I know somebody gave IBM stock, and that's McMichael series is that named, proceeds come to that.
Yeah.
Are those, how much of the endowment is restricted?
In terms of the specific holdings?
Yeah, where you can't, where it stays on forever on the books, you know, where like IBM stays there until it drops to zero.
None of the specific holdings are restricted. In fact, if you give us, if you give a stock gift for the endowment, those get transferred into our account, and typically they're liquidated, and then the money would be spread around our other holdings to reflect what our current strategy is. It's certainly possible that if those were a preferred stock or a particularly high dividend yielding position, then it could be that the administrator would say, let's hold on to that for the time being. But for the most part, any of your stock or bonds or other gifts are sold, and then the money goes to reflect that. Jim Stevens meets with the Finance Committee at least twice a year, and whenever else we'd like to meet with him. Jim Wood from Stevens. And so we talk about that. We recently looked at our position in the Finance Committee and the vestry, decided that we were overexposed in equities. And so in the last quarter of the year, we reduced some of our exposure to equities. It was closer to 80-20, which was pretty high for a position like ours. And that's been pulled back closer to sort of 60-40, or it's in process of doing that. Don't quote me on those exact numbers, but something like that. But I'm certainly happy to share with you the details of those holdings.
No, I was just curious, if it was conservatively managed or how it was managed.
Yeah, it is. I wouldn't say it's actively managed. I would say our manager helps us choose money managers through either ETFs or mutual funds, some specific holdings. But it's very responsive to what the vestry has said. But for the most part, he's done that, and he's done that beautifully well. And the Vestry and Finance Committee have kind of said, okay, and I think as we try to beef up our planned giving program, we want to be even clearer and more intentional about how we manage that with them. Yeah, thank you. Other questions? Hold on a second, Evelyn. And we've got about 2 minutes until we have to stop. And before Evelyn speaks, let me say, if we need to come back, we'll do it again. I can't imagine anything more fun than 2 annual meetings in a year. But what I really mean is that if you have any lingering questions or concerns, I hope you'll share them with me or a member of the vestry. This is good for us to be here, and it's good for us to do this. Evelyn.
I just wanted to ask about your discretionary fund. I think I've understood that there's a certain, like the last Sunday of the month, that the plate offering is for that, or what's the plan for handling that?
That's right. No change in how that's handled. The discretionary funds, Suzanne and I and any of the clergy here who encounter a need are welcome to use those funds accordingly. The discretionary funds are funded by your gifts, not a part of the budget. The plate offering on the first Sunday of the month goes to the discretionary funds. That's not only a tradition, but a sort of a canonical expectation. It doesn't have to be that way, but we kind of participate. And we use those funds to meet the needs of those who walk through the door. Sometimes for some ministries that are above the expectations of the budget, but usually to help people with, I helped somebody this week who needed to put down a bond for the title of a car that she bought, as well as a deposit for her insurance so that she can drive to and from work. And those are the kind of needs that a lot of other agencies aren't able to handle because of how they're restricted. And so we use those funds accordingly. There's a resolution in place that the clergy can benefit in no way from those, and we're glad for that. Otherwise, all of that could be taxable income, and I already pay enough when it comes to taxes. But there's no change to how the discretionary fund is funded. That's right, first Sunday of the month.
I got one last question.
Yeah.
In what you're going to post for us on the actual budget, does that budget show actual 2018 as a comparative to budgeted 2019 and the variance?
It purports to. But as I said earlier, there's some areas, it does show the actual, but there are some areas where it's just not clear. And if you look at it, you'll see, why is there such a big discrepancy? And the answer is because of that. And I'm trying to think of a good example for how I could express that. But there are certain areas of the budget, like some salary expenses, that got all lumped together in one line instead of spread out over the different areas of ministry. And so as a result, you'll see some that are much higher or lower. Where it was traceable or clear, it's in there. But where it wasn't, it's kind of aggregate. Next year, that 2019 actual will be right on line with this budget. But this year, it's the best that we can do. But if you look at it and you have any questions, I'm happy to show you the year-end financial details so that you can also try to track those. Absolutely. Thank y'all. I thank y'all for your time. Thank you for your prayers. Again, keep the conversation going. Let me know if you have any concerns that we haven't addressed. One important thing. This budget includes some changes particularly to children's ministry. We've operated with a half-time children's director for a long time, and the vestry and I believe that our children's ministry needs a full-time children's director. And so that position is in place in the budget starting after the school year is out. And so we'll begin the process of thinking about what that ministry might look like as it's equipped with a full-time children's director instead of just a half-time. That's also wrapped up in the budget, but an important change for us as we grow in our ministry. There are 20 copies of the budget that I will leave here on the podium. Come get one if you'd like. Look for that later on the website, and also let me know if you have any questions. Is there a motion that we adjourn our annual meeting? A motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Thank you very much.